What is the 8-sequence method?
So the 8-sequence method is the structuring method I use after the my nutshell technique. So instead of using one of the beat sheet methods that are out there, and all we're doing, the 8-sequence method has been around supposedly since the beginning of film. I'm yet to see the visual proof of it, but supposedly early scripts were actually divided in 8 sequences, that each sequence was from a different roll of film, basically. So each reel was a different sequence. And what I like about it is I'm just breaking it into more manageable bites. So again, I'm not getting into individual beats, but the beginning of Act 1 and the end of Act 1 have a different feel. And so that's why it's sequence 1 and sequence 2. And so basically all we're doing is we're breaking it up into roughly 15-minute or 15-page sequences. So Act 1 becomes 2 15-minute sequences, sequence 1 and sequence 2. Act 2 becomes 4 15-minute sequences. And then Act 3 is 1 15-minute sequence, and then that sequence 8 is actually just a 5-minute, because the last sequence is just basically one scene. And so, particularly when we're looking at that second act of the 60 pages that are so overwhelming, and everybody gets stuck about the middle, it's going to be real helpful to, instead of thinking about, this problem in Act 2, it's like, well, this problem in my sequence 5, right? We can get the problem may not be the entire Act 2, it's this one sequence, right? And another thing I like about using sequences is I have my writers in my classes, I have them, when they submit beat sheets for critique, to divide them into 8 sequences. And I tell them to title each of the sequences. And it's a little bit like those old, if you remember, DVD chapter titles, right? It's kind of a hint of what's to come. And it's an exercise that I like because, first of all, if you're having a hard time naming your sequence, and the naming is a little bit like if each sequence was its own short film, what would you call it? And if you're having trouble naming it, that points to maybe a lack of cohesion, right? That maybe it's a little too all over the place. Maybe you need to have your getting ready for the heist beats all in sequence 3, and move your love interest to not start, till the very end of that, right? It kind of helps you isolate these things. For someone like me who's used the 8-sequence method, and it's been around, like I said, predates me, predates all the screenwriting books, actually, and it's a method that's been taught throughout the years at a couple of universities. And the other reason I like them to title the sequences is it's a really nice shorthand. So, today you're gonna do some writing. What am I gonna work on? I look at my beat sheet and I say, I'm gonna work on sequence 4. Everybody grows to hate him, or whatever the title is. And it's just easy for me to remember what this 15 pages is about, and give it some coherence.
Is it a coincidence that the nutshell technique is also 8 elements?
It is. It is a coincidence. There's no one-to-one correspondence to them, because remember, the nutshell technique is basically just things in Act 1 and Act 3, and then we have one element that's right at the end of Act 2. But I don't go into that, and that's why it kind of works nice with it. If people feel like they need something beyond, that just working with a nutshell alone feels too scary, that they need a little bit more, or, they're used to a beat sheet method, or they need a little bit more structure, then I think 8 sequences is a nice way to break things down, so you're not intimidated when you face the big, scary 60 pages that make up Act 2. It's like, no, I'm working on sequence 3, which is 15 pages. It's not so scary.
In your classes, or with just other things in the screenwriting realm, have you seen new writers give up because they just felt that their Act 2 was unsatisfying, or they were frustrated?
A lot of people have come to me because of that. A lot of people have not been able to figure out why is it that I lost steam? Why is it that, I felt so exciting. I had such a great setup, and then it just kind of petered out. And so hopefully am giving them the solutions, I'd like to think, where that won't happen. If you set things up properly in Act 1 and Act 3, that shouldn't happen. I strongly maintain that, and I think you've heard this expression before, that, the problem in your third act is in your first act. Right? These things are very related. And actually your problem in your act 2 probably has to do with the fact that you don't know your first act and your third act. You don't know where you're coming from, and you don't know where you're going to. If we know those things, it can hopefully get you through act 2. So I've had a lot of people have come to me just because of that. That's a very common problem, right? That people write, and I think that's one of the dangers of writing blindly, of like, you know your setup, but you don't know your ending. If you don't really know your story, if all you know is your setup, if you don't know your ending.